So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Actually, it's going to be a 20 minutes paper, and for 10 minutes I'm going to talk to you, and then my colleague Allister will speak about the technical aspects of this project. I think both lectures before me were quite impressive, and I particularly remember quite fondly of the Varga exhibition in the Benedek Museum, which was one of the best exhibitions I've ever seen in terms of using digital technology. We usually take it for granted and never think about it, that how a nonsense is it to create a museum of literature, isn't it? I mean, the literature is the thing which you read, which you learn by heart, which you tell to children, to partners, to the world, but it's not a thing which we watch, standing in front of windows or cabinets. It's an absolutely demanding thing, and it's just beautiful, you see, that the Benedek Museum in Hungary is able to produce these 200 or 250,000 visitors a year, which I think is just exceptional, and it shows how well organized this museum is, and nonetheless, because such projects as the office project with this presenting the various poems with various kind of tools made it understandable and joyful. And that's what the main point. You see, people began to learn that how joyful it could be. Now, altogether, we usually talk about the crisis in museums, the crisis in museum visitors, and so on. But thank you very much. In Hungary, after all, we have 9 million visitors a year in the museums. Maybe a 10% is a lie, but it can't be more than 10%, you see. That's 8 million visitors in a country of less than 10 million people, with the tourists of about sort of 7 or 9 million per year. So it's still a successful thing. So why do we need to use these digital technologies? And that was the first thing when we joined to this SHIFT project that we have to think about. The main idea was, you see, this is a kind of a unique project. We have 3 kind of partners. One is the museums and collections, say libraries. The other type of partners are those which are sort of corporate bodies, so private enterprises involved in developing various kinds of digital technologies. And the third parts are university departments, which are usually on digital technology as well. So then we have 3 different reasons and 3 different objectives and aims. And we have to sort of keep them somehow together. And this project has been run for about almost 2 years by now, I suppose. And, well, no, that's me and the digital technology, you see. And even better, because I just can't watch my slides, you see. I mean, I'm short-sighted, obviously. Anyway, so... but there are still, you see, why do we use it? There are nevertheless different kinds of museums all around the world. So one kind is, which you usually think of, are the art museums. And the art museum has a very unique position among the very many museums, because in the art museum, I think the digital technology practically destroys the event, destroys the direct connection between the visitor and the object. You must watch the object itself. There are wonderful copies. There could be wonderful copies, wonderful digital copies or printed copies, or any kind of paintings. But somehow, even Bill Gates is buying the original paintings. There must be a reason for it, that he's not printing it for himself. He surely could have can use much better technologies that are available for us. But still he would like to buy the original one, because the original one is the original one. It is unique and unrepeatable, and the one who is watching it has the feeling that it has been watched many and many people before him. The other kind of museums, I mean, say history and archaeology museums, there are still objects which are perhaps not aesthetically that strong as the art museums, but still the uniqueness of the object, it means something. We can buy a wonderful copy, and we have lots of copies of St. Stephen's Crown, the St. Crown of Hungary. In the National Museum we have 2 copies actually, quite good ones. But you see, the original one, from which for 800 years the Hungarians thought that power is emanating, and this power brings together and keeps together the whole country, it is unique, and it's in the parliament. So the copy, again, is not worth as much as the one. But there are nevertheless the third kind of museums, and these are various kinds of historical museums, where the object itself is perhaps, doesn't have the same aesthetic value, doesn't perhaps has the same uniqueness, but nevertheless the story and the importance of, I mean, historical importance is above all. And this is, for example, one, the Semmelweis Museum on the history of medicine. So the reason why we joined this project was that the museums are keeping heritage. So our main concern is keeping heritage and making it available, making it accessible to various kinds of people all around the world, including all our country, foreigners and so on. But we need some technologies, and those technologies which could be used to explain the use of this, or the former use of these objects, from surgical objects, from various kinds of representations of the human body, various kinds of surgical operations, and so on and so on. And because then they could understand it better. So that was the main reason. So the way how we did the thing was I would just like to mention something, the immersive space exhibitions. These are sort of very popular things to know, but we usually miss again a point, you see. In the immersive space exhibition, and that's a big difference between a normally curated exhibition and an immersive space exhibition. In the immersive space exhibition, the enjoyment of the visitor could be much higher than a normal exhibition, no question about it. But this is already an interpretation. And the difference is, you see, the curator is trying to interpret the object according to the original meanings. It always tries to recreate the original context of the object. What did it mean for those people who lived hundreds or thousands of years ago? Whereas in the immersive exhibition, the curator is giving an interpretation about what he thinks is valid for today. So that's a very different kind of thing. In a way, I think, in a sense, it's an artistic form on itself. So it is not a normal creative thing, but it is a kind of art which is interesting and important, but you can't use it always and in most cases. So for us, accessibility, inclusion, and usability was the main aim, and the most important point with the Shift exhibition was that we wanted to use up-to-date or state-of-the-art, even beyond the state-of-the-art technologies for including VA and AI. How is it? What's the proper word? AI-generated content, which is presented through either VI, whatever, Googles or glasses or whatever, to make it understandable, more easily understandable for the visitors. My partner is going to tell you, my colleague is going to tell you this in detail, because this is not my word. I don't even use the words properly, as you see. So we had this inclusive goal. And the inclusive goal was, in the beginning, we thought that how wonderful it would be. But if you could sort of target those groups who has some problematic, these are the partners, some troubles, and they can't really watch it as well. How we can make them more accessible for those who are short-sightedness or are blind practically, or almost blind, and all the rest of it, or even with hearing impairments. With hearing impairments, they can read, sure, but there are some contents, and many contents in museums, which should be made more accessible for these people. And there is this vast territory of autism spectrum, which is really, really demanding, and how we can sort of make them for more accessible or content and or knowledge. That's not really for me. There are some examples, but I think examples are going to be mentioned by Allister as well. So, for example, one of the, which we all meet in most museums, that the numismatic collections are partly huge, partly just wonderful. These are wonderful objects, but very small. And because they are small, you can't really watch them. And because they represent some very sort of strange iconography, and you need a very, very good knowledge in iconology to understand the coin, especially a commemorative coin, then you are not going to watch it. So there is a barrier between the visitors and the, say, scholarship, and they are, be frank, I mean, they are boring. So if you just watch hundreds or thousands of coins, that's going to be boring. And how we can make it sort of more understandable? And one thing was to move them and to emphasize some parts of it, or where is it? With the laser. So some parts of it, or even to attach various kind of extra information to some parts. Well, that's right. It's the three target groups. And then, obviously, we wanted to make it more thoughtful. And the main idea was, you see, that is not we, including the developers, not the university people, not the museum people, who are going to find out what is needed for these people living with various kinds of impairment, but we involve them in the discussions from the very beginning. That's what they would need. And then we had these lovely talks with various kinds of groups of people. Obviously, it was very demanding with the autism of the autists, but the other two groups, it went quite smoothly and with lots of fun. Now we are in the test phase. We have 10 months left from the project, and by May next year, we are going to produce some exhibitions in Budapest and in other countries, other institutions, where we shall present all outcomes and all products and so on. Thank you so much for your attention. Okay, and please, yeah.
Is there a second presentation? I will double check in a second, but in the meantime, so what I will be talking about is more about the Shift project, but more about its inclusivity and its use of technology. And most notably, it's the use of technology in a sparing and very effective way. For instance, in recent years, we've seen very heavily the massive increase and implementation of AI in just about everything. And this is something that is seen as necessary to implement in museum spaces, both to integrate, to educate, to digitalize in these spaces, but it's also important to make sure that this technology does not detract from the importance and the significance of an object itself. And the use of this technology should be something that enhances the existing properties of an artifact, a mural, a painting, an art piece, in a way that meaningfully creates an engaging exhibit, an engaging experience for its users, without detracting from either the origin, the original meaning, or the context in which the piece was created. Is there any luck with the presentation? Oh, it's on the back. Oh my God, I can't see it on my screen. Okay, amazing. Let me go back a little bit. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Allister. I am from Massive Dynamics Sweden. We are one of the members of the consortium, both made up, as Benedek pointed out, of tech partners, museums, and cultural institutions, as well as universities. And we are a small company focused on tech integration with a big impact or a big focus on the use of training and digitalization for museum spaces and sustainability. Now, it is not up to me as someone in the private sector to tell you, mostly members of museums and other cultural institutions, what your challenges are with digitalization. You will know far better than myself. But these are some of the key points that came up during discussions among Shift, and these are the key figures for discerning what we need to understand when we utilize technology in this program. And this is that the technology can be integrated effectively, that it engages the audience, and importantly, that it is a longevity of investment. It is not a technology that is simply applied for an exhibit or a short time and then thrown out or put aside, especially when a lot of this technology is expensive, both for the technology itself, as well as for the hours those employees have to put in to implement it. And importantly, as I was discussing before, the preservation of object significance. And the question is, how do you solve for this? What technologies do you use? And this is what was posed at the beginning of the project. And implementing the right technology was key to discerning what we needed to use. Technology needed to be engaging across a wide audience base. It needed to incorporate AI in some way, and there is a question mark at the end of that statement, and I'll get to that later. But importantly, it needs to enhance the existing properties of artifacts that exist. It needs to be usable for curators, and of course, it needs to be expandable for the future. It cannot be a one-and-done project. And this leads to the partnership and the pairing, specifically with the work done at Massive Dynamic, with the Semmelweis Museum of Medical History, because there is a perfect connection here for the enhancement of existing properties of artifacts. The Semmelweis Museum of Medical History is unique in that it has a number of objects of medical implements and devices. So instead of a 2D medium, it is a tool. It is something that is a 3D usable object that has a lot of practical applications. And this made it a perfect platform for the implementation and the use of 2D to 3D modeling, which is our tech focus. So this device is a trepine. In fact, despite the fact that it has a nice little heart handle, it is actually a device used to dig into the skulls of people. Luckily, we don't use these anymore. And what you can see on the right here is, in Blender, a implementation of this as a 3D model. Now, this object, for instance, is actually just a draft. This was made by our engineers in about an hour earlier in the week, and I just managed to sneak it into the presentation. And you can see that it is a fairly good rendering of the object, but there's still a lot to work on. It's a bit too shiny, there's not enough detail, and the program doesn't quite understand what it's doing with the space in the heart-shaped handle, so it's filled it in. And this is a basic showcase of what it looks like when you use this in the short term to just quickly generate an object. Now, this leads to the question, how do you practically apply a model like this, a virtual 3D model, to engage and educate interactively in a museum? And you can see that this image, also provided by the Semmelweis Museum, is of a lot of people having a terrible day. And luckily, we don't use this anymore, as I said before, but back then, this was very modern technology. And as you can see with zoom into this picture, this object is actually available in the museum, and this was something that we, in a previous experiment and a previous showcase, have now rendered into an effective 3D model. And this is what will be shown here in this video. And there you can see the model has a lot more detail. All of the space has been filled for it, and it's actually interactable.
This rare instrument was used to lift the plate of the skull during trepanning. It was used to lift a piece of skull during the trepanning procedure, during 17th to 18th century. Grab the trepine, place it on the position on the human head model and turn the handle to drill into the skull.
Right, the squeaky sound effect is always a bit haunting the first time you hear it. So this is an example of how to implement 2D to 3D modeling into a usable environment that both enhances the object and the artifact itself, but also implements it in a way that uses the technology. Instead of just showcasing it, instead of just being able to see it, but needing to preserve the sanctity of the object so not everyone can go up and give it a try, what we've done is taken it, placed it as a 3D mesh into a VR environment with another member of the Shift organization, Forth, and they have built this virtual reality model. Now, please ignore the terrible voiceover. It is just the AI-generated draft, and the team will make a much, much better sounding voiceover when it comes to it. But this is a placeholder for the accessibility portion for those who are either visually or hearing impaired, and visual impairment doesn't apply as much to this. But what you could see, and what is also in other portions of the project, is that you can actually physically lift this object up in a VR environment. And this is through the use of haptic gloves, which basically give a physical feedback when you are interacting with something in the VR environment. And in this case, it allows for an effective integration of the use of the trepine into a practical example. Now, while these objects are a perfect use case for this and a perfect example, they aren't the only ways to implement 2D to 3D modeling and these meshes, especially when a lot of art objects and artifacts are 2D, whether it's paintings or images or other objects. And this is where we come back to the use of AI and the sparing use of AI. In some portions of the project, it's more heavily used, but for our case, it's how to use it sparingly. It's how not to interrupt or disturb the sanctity of the object, but still to be able to create a model from it utilizing AI. So we have the original painting here, but the AI creation is actually making a model of the image from behind in 2 different angles. And between this, we can then make a 3D mesh of the image itself, and we can utilize this in future projects. Now the question from this is just, where do we go from here? As the project comes to an end over the next few months, we're focused on optimizing 3D object creation, expanding the image library, and integrating it more into VR spaces. I can't promise anything, but that is a discussion with Benedek that we will be implementing some very fun medical objects, like an entire, one of those, like those chairs or like big benches you lie in at the dentist. So something like this could be very interactable and very usable, but still preserves the object if we can place it in a 3D model and in a VR environment. And finally, this technology will be integrated with the other shift teams that are focusing on other forms of technology. There's other focuses in video implementation, so creating videos from still images, which is more AI heavy, but still seeks to preserve the sanctity of the objects. There's creating soundscapes with an audio team, which also has a special effect for, and a special focus on accessibility for those who are visually impaired. And finally, to integrate accessibility in all aspects of the technology to allow it to appeal to the widest audience possible. Thank you very much.
Just to mention something more, that's a short sentence. So the point is, which was mentioned by Allister, is that there is a morality when we begin to use VR technology on the objects. So the problem is, you see, we can make, say, La Gioconda, the Leonardo's painting, crying. But can we do it? I mean, we can do it technically, but practically we can't, because there is a morality. So we have to sort of stick always the closest to the original meaning of the object as it was. So that practically, we had a lots of talks within this project, because there was lots of discussion about between, say, the technical partners and the collections on the principles. And this is perhaps one of the most important principles of all museum stuff, that this duty of preserving the heritage and interpreting the heritage itself and not changing the meaning of the heritage is an essential duty of our profession. And there is a real danger when we begin to apply various kinds of sort of absolute technologies that we can actually completely change the meaning or create objects which never existed. So in the case, for example, in this Trifine thing, and that's quite funny, they are still in use. Please come to watch the exhibition. It still has about 1 month to run, and this exhibition is about how little changed in some aspects the surgery, because obviously the tools are better, electrical motors are, the engines are sort of driving them and so on, but the principles are the very same even today, and but they're not really frightening, because you won't watch it when it's done on your skull. So thank you very much for your attention once again.